recent Range Beef Cow Symposium, we sat down with Gregg Doud, the president of the Commodity Markets Council, to discuss global beef trade and possible markets for U.S. beef. Gregg has previously been the chief economist for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and also spent time on congressional staffs, including that of Kansas Senator Pat Roberts. I started by asking Gregg to quantify the importance of beef exports to the average cattle producer.
Well, historically, they were a small portion of what we did, and it was kind of a niche business. But in today's world, exports are worth about $300, or about 17% of every fed steer heifer that we sell in this country. And so you have going to be nearly $6 billion, 5.5, I think this year, $6 billion next year in beef exports. And historically, the markets are Japan, Mexico, Canada, and South Korea. The Canadian market is always kind of there because we're, Grand Island, Nebraska is 1,000 miles closer to Toronto, Canada, where all the people live, than Calgary, Alberta is. So that the Canadian beef flows into the west coast of the U.S. We sell $1 billion worth of beef into Toronto is kind of how that works. Mexico is a huge Mexico City market, but the Asian markets are where it's at. And coming forward, huge development with regard to China. It is growing by leaps and bounds. It's doing what soybeans did 10 years ago. It is exploding. And I think that's the thing that we really need to be positive about on the beef side, is that here comes China.
What would it take for the U.S. to gain a major share of that market?
Well, first of all, we've got a market access issue.
Right, exactly.
That we have to deal with there, and it's going to take time. And part of that was our own undoing years ago when we began to do some non-tariff trade barriers with regard to discussions with China that really backfired on us. And so often on all of these ag trade issues, we can be our own worst enemy. And this is an issue of the one final piece in the post-BSE discussion and market access that we've still got to fix. But the market is there. They are now the biggest beef importer in the world, exceeding the U.S., growing now by leaps and bounds. 80% of what they're taking is from South America, but they like U.S. grain-fed, and that's where we need to go.
Is it realistic to say within the next 10 years maybe they'll lessen some restrictions and the U.S. will have more access in that market?
Oh, I'd like to think within the next year or two that we could do that. I mean, it's already almost a $750 million market, and I think we are well positioned to take advantage of that. And I think the point here is that the price of beef the price that China is paying for beef today is nearly what it is in the U.S. This is not the market that it was 10 years ago when we were last in there. It is a very well developed restaurant style market, just like you would see in South Korea, frankly. And the potential there is enormous. It's the strong underpinning under these markets that it's the one thing I think the message is we've got a real solid foundation under these prices because of this international demand.
As you mentioned, Japan has historically been a good partner for the U.S. Does that continue forward?
It does. We finally, earlier this year, were able to get Japan to 30 months, and this big discussion over a trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think in the coming year, 2014, there's a really good chance that we could actually wrap that thing up and bring Japan, really a backdoor free trade agreement with Japan, that at a 38.5% tariff, if we can bring that down, it makes Japan just an outstanding market for us going forward. And
you said today that natural gas production in the U.S. could help that?
It actually is one of the interesting discussions, is that after Fukushima and the disaster they had in Japan, they're switching away from nuclear, switching towards natural gas, and lo and behold, the U.S. is now a big player in that industry and that market. So I think there's a discussion there and a relationship that could really be of benefit to U.S. agriculture and in particular U.S. beef producers.
Cow-calf producers and feedlot producers both now know Zomax well. It's used as a beta agonist. Across the seas, is it a big issue?
All of the technology that we use in agriculture in the U.S., whether it's GMOs, Optiflex ractopamine, all of the advantages that we take for granted sometimes in agriculture in the U.S. are big issues with customers around the world. It isn't as much they're opposed to it as they want to better understand it, and sometimes we get in a situation where politics get out in front of the science, and that causes real problems for us. We have to continue to work on communication and explaining the technology. Even on the GMO issue, we take it for granted here. Overseas, it's still, nothing is taken for granted. We have a lot of education that we have to do.
But you feel that consumers there are open-minded and willing to listen?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, for example, Taiwan with regard to pork, they've indicated that it'll be a long, long time before they're willing to accept that. But there's some other issues there related to what's happened in those markets with things that we've banned in the U.S. a long time ago. They've had problems with their own producers. And so there are issues and concerns that really, frankly, have nothing to do with us that we have to understand as we work with them to be able to use these technologies.
These are obviously big macro issues that we're talking about here, but do you think it's important that producers sort of keep an eye on these things on a daily basis, and how better can they be informed on things like these?
I think the big thing is they have to be able to explain the technology to the housewife in their neighborhood, the housewife in Lincoln or New York City. We in agriculture must do a much better job of explaining why we use this technology and the benefits of this technology, just not for us in our own economic situation on the farm, but for the benefit of consumers as well.